Welcome into the roundtable. I'm Brad Wakai. That is my co-host Tyson Gentry. We are breaking down the NCAA basketball tournament, Tyson. The championship game on Monday. Oh gosh, it's bittersweet because it was a great tournament as always, a fun tournament. But now we have to kiss college basketball goodbye for a long period of time.
How do you go about that at the end of the year? Because it's never as hard for me as I think it's going to be during March, because I just immediately go into like draft season in the NFL, and then we have playoff races in the NBA. Like my dumb brain, I'm just going so fast that I don't give it a proper send off. So how do you like approach that? Do you give it a day of mourning?
Yeah, I kind of like look at everything online. And like last night, I was like heavy into like what's the Sports Center thing going on. But of course, they're like moving on to baseball already too. And I'm just like, there was like something they did, like a feature story. I forget who the reporter was, but it was like a hard hitting like 2 minute. And I was like, damn, man, now that's kind of like a good way to put the bow on the season. So I basically did that in one shining moment. Always gets you a little emotional.
Yeah, you got to do one shining moment. I got a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. I got a little not choked up, but when Jim Nance said, "Thanks for being my friend,"
Oh
I thought
yeah,
that
man,
was
I
a
got a
pretty
little
good
choked
call
up.
at the end. I mean,
Yeah,
we'll see him in 3 days at the Masters, but yeah, it was pretty nice.
yeah, it was. And if you haven't heard, the UConn Huskies are champions of college basketball, once again beating San Diego State 76-59, completing just a dominant run of form. They won every single game by double digits, and they were the best team in the tournament by all the metrics they played at, and they capitalized on that, or really kind of put a stamp on that in the championship game, Tyson. They were super impressive for about an entire month.
Yeah, it was crazy. San Diego State cut it to 5 for like it felt like a possession at the end of the game, and then UConn just ballooned it right back up. I mean, this team, what do you do with them? Like, what were you supposed to do? Out of everybody in the tournament, like they can go bigger than you, they can go faster than you up and down the court, they can score in half court sets, and me and you are so stupid that we look past all that because we hated Danny Hurley so much, and now he's a national champion head basketball coach, Brad. And I think we have to wear that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, we always like say, like, "Oh man, we kind of fucked up," but at the same time, like, if we would have bet on them to do it, and they again get eliminated in the early rounds, we would have been just feeling just as stupid. So it's what do we always say? What's the motto of this show? You gotta show us, right? You got to prove to us. And now, Danny Hurley, they were better coached than every single team they played. They were awesome. They continued to get better throughout the tournament. And I'm not talking like winning margin. I'm talking about how they approached the game, how they wanted to run their offensive sets, how they attacked on defense. And they were peaking legitimately at the right time into the second half of the NCAA tournament. Like, he did a fantastic job with this group. But the other thing is, too, Tyson, like, this was a team that was unranked coming into the season, looked unbelievable in the preseason tournaments and the preseason conference stuff, stumbled during the Big East, finished fourth in that conference. We're like, man, I don't even know if this team's very good. And now people are going to look at it and be like, well, of course UConn won. Like, why didn't we think of this? It's like, well, I don't know. I mean, the analytics loved them, and that was about it.
I mean, they got swept by Xavier this year, didn't they? They got beat up pretty hard by like your Creightons and your Marquettes, because the Big East is a good conference.
Yeah.
But at no point during the conference play part of the season did you think like, oh, this is the best team in the country. I didn't even think that during the first round against Iona. And I don't know if I thought it until they were up about 30 points on Arkansas. That was probably the first time where that went through my head. And by that point, it was too late. They were killing everybody, and it was just a train you didn't want to get in front of. I was impressed, man. But all the talk I'm hearing today is almost like this is the most untouchable college basketball team of all time, and I want to see where you're at with that.
Well, it's crazy. I mean, they don't even have the largest margin of victory in tournament history. Like, there's
Is it
been,
fourth since '85 or something like that?
yeah, and they are they're the sixth team to go 6-0 through through the tournament and win by double digits. So it's not even like they did a special feat. You know what I mean? Like, there's been
Right.
other teams that have done exactly what UConn did, and they didn't even do it in the most impressive fashion. If you really want to talk about it, like that 2016 Villanova team
I
had
like
the largest
2018.
margin of victory.
I think
And
2018 Nova, I think.
I think one of those two, because I was looking at it and I was just like, man, I forgot how good those Nova teams were. And so, no, I mean, this UConn team, listen, we're talking about this tournament. This is a Final Four that has the second highest seeds ever. And great. I mean, UConn had to take care of business, but listen, they were not. This isn't the best team that's ever been assembled in college basketball. They had a great run in the tournament. I don't want to take anything away from them, but we got to pump the brakes on that.
Impressive what they were able to do to everybody that they played, but it, like I said, it was Iona, and then it was a team that was like out before the weekend in the SEC tournament. They beat up a Mountain West team in the national championship. They beat Miami, who like captured magic in a bottle, lightning in a bottle to be there. So it wasn't like the highest level of difficulty to get to where they were as a 4 seed. But dude, next time they're in the West, like they're coming out of the West. You just have to put it on your bracket. Next time that the Final Four is in Texas, you put UConn in the national championship spot and you work backwards. They're going to be around now. This doesn't feel like to me like a Kevin Ollie situation, where he kind of just won with Calhoun's leftovers, and then as soon as those guys got out the door, it was like, oh fuck, this guy he's in over his head a little bit. This was a slow burn over the last couple of years, and I mean, dude, if I'm looking around the country at where I want to play, and I'm a 18-year-old kid, UConn looks way more fun to me than going and being regimented at North Carolina or something like that right now. Like UConn looks free in the way that they play basketball, which is pretty unique. I mean, they're running NBA sets, like, and college teams just don't do that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you know, Danny Hurley talked about how he had to keep his emotions in check a lot more this season, because I'm sure, you know, it's a high level, like he's an emotional guy. You know, he is a Hurley. Like if you look at that family, I mean, you're not shocked when you hear that, or if you watch him on the sideline. And so I'm sure, you know, it is a draining program to play for. You know, it's not like they're just rolling out the ball and it's like, whoa, this is YMCA basketball. We're having so much fun here. Like it's demanding, I'm sure. But I think you're right in terms of like what you're able to do as a player. Like you're able to chuck up threes. Like you're able to go and run and get up and down, and then, you know, take chances on defense. Yeah, and that's the thing. But let me run this for you here, Tyson. So I'm looking at this roster. So Joey Calcaterra, the guard coming off the bench, he's a grad senior. He'll be gone. Tristan Newton and Naheem Eileen, the two guards, they're both seniors. They'll be gone. Andre Jackson Jr. said he's coming back. He's a junior. So, you know, the captain's coming back. I would expect Jordan Hawkins to be going to the NBA. And then Adama Sanogo, who won Final Four Most Valuable Player, he's a junior. He can theoretically come back, but I would expect him to potentially test his waters in the NBA. So what do you think? Like, they're one of the early favorites to win a title next year. Do we need to pump the brakes on that?
I think so. I mean, to me, Hawkins, and I don't know shit from anybody else. I'm not saying I'm an NBA scout, but like this dude, to me, he's going to play in the NBA. Like, I'm more comfortable taking a Jordan Hawkins at a lottery pick than I would have been taking a Jeremy Lamb if you want to go UConn for UConn. Like, I just think his game is really well suited, and he does the dirty work too. I mean, he was down there fighting with guys for rebounds. If I'm Adama Sanogo, don't you think you look at Kofi Coburn and just say like, oh, like that's worst case scenario. They're different players, and Sanogo's more athletic and he's better. But like, there's not really a spot for that guy on playoff roster in the NBA. Not to say that he can't be like a 13th man, but it seems far fetched for him to be a starter one day for the Phoenix Suns or the Golden State Warriors or whatever competing for titles. Like, this is where the NIL deal stuff gets fun, because now what does the bag look like in stores to stay at Connecticut versus a second round rookie contract or playing overseas or something like that? Like, this is the first real test for me of it, because I think he's probably a back end. I mean, if Trace Jackson Davis is going 30th in mocks, then you have to imagine Sanogo is probably a little bit behind him as far as the NBA goes. Like, if you're getting $2 million to stay, don't you think that sounds nice?
Yeah, 2 million, I think, is a stretch, though. You know, because I think when I was looking at it today for the highest rated NIL deals, you know, I think Bronny James would be pulling in like only like 1.5, 1.7. So I think, you know, Sanogo getting 2 it'd be interesting. But I think you're right. Like, that's a guaranteed deal. Let's even say it's $500K. Like, what are you pulling in going to the G League? Is it that, you know, as there stipulations? Like, I'm not quite sure on that front, but that's a good thought where it comes to this NIL, because before, Tyson, Miami was really progressive on this. Like, hey, let's use this to get players from other colleges to come to Miami. We'll give them the NIL package that'll help them stay in college. That'll convince them to come for us. In this case, this would be, hey, I could potentially go, late first, probably a second rounder, kick around in the G League or potentially go overseas. Why don't I just stay in college for another year, get my guaranteed NIL, and then we'll figure it out from there. So I think that's a great thought that you just had.
I mean, if he shows back up, I mean, then they are probably the favorites because he was intimidating as shit, I think, to everybody else that played them throughout the tournament. Because, like, the Big East is a lot of things, but the Big East isn't soft. It never has been soft, and it probably never will be soft. No matter what Creighton does on offense, you can pretend. People like to say, oh, jump shooting team, but Creighton will get to the rim. They don't give a shit. Sunogo was too big, strong, and physical for a lot of these guys from other conferences. And I think that's only going to kind of expound upon itself if he decides to return to school. Because this is a big body dude that has really good footwork. And honestly, if he were to come back to school and he adds a 12-footer, like a consistent mid-range, free throw line extended jump shot, then all of a sudden maybe he's playing himself into more money in the future. And that's something I think you have to think about as well.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was nice to see him step back and hit some threes against Miami.
Wasn't
I
that
didn't know he had
ridiculous?
that
I didn't know he
consistently.
could do that. I didn't know
Yeah,
he could do that.
so right, and you obviously big men need to shoot the ball in the NBA. Is that something he works on to come back? Like there's something there. 5 recruits for UConn coming in out of the class of 2023. 1 5-star kid, Stephon Castle from Georgia, 6'6" combo guard. The rest are 4 stars. One other guard, 2 wings, and then a center who is a 7-footer out of the Bronx, New York, Yusuf Singari. And he's a 3-star guy. I mean, they're getting loaded up, and that's what Dan Hurley does, man. He's a recruiter, and he's gonna build this thing. Because let's be honest, Tyson, you said it off the top. UConn's a basketball destination,
Yep.
and not just for men's and women's, which we mainly know for women's because the dominance that Gino Auriemma's built there. But it's begging the question right now. Is this a blue blood program? And I think by the letter of the law, that's maybe something we can discuss. Is it now? Probably, they have 5 championships now. They're tied with Duke. They're tied with Indiana, and we're talking about like UCLA. Yeah, UCLA has 11. The majority of those were before the shot clock. I mean, I think maybe all of them were. I'm sure there was one that wasn't, or a couple that weren't. But if we look at it this way, I personally think UConn's played themselves into the category of a blue blood. Like if we look at it from a history standpoint, no, because their first Final Four is 1999. Like if we're looking at the history of the game, probably not. But if we want to talk about elite programs in this sport, you have to include UConn because 5 national championships is ridiculous.
And they've done it in a way, and this is the best part. Nobody hates them because they suck for 2 or 3 years in between these national championships, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh yeah, we're built to win the whole thing again. So they kind of stay out of people's minds, which probably hurts them in the blue blood argument. And you mentioned since '99. In 1995, the University of Connecticut had 0 men's or women's championships.
Oof.
Since then, they have 16.
Jeez.
16. Are they a blue blood? I mean, by the traditional definition, probably not, because that definition is, again, old and kind of outdated. Did blue bloods even exist? We had that conversation. I'm kind of leaning more towards no. I think that it's just a fun little moniker to give people. But if they're not, then who is? Because if you talk about the quote unquote new bloods that people are throwing out there, like they're so far ahead in the last 25 years of pretty much everybody outside of Villanova in that kind of discussion. I mean, like we thought Louisville was going to do it. We thought Florida was going to do it when they went back to back. We thought, you name it, whoever it is throughout time. Like, to me, they're more of a blue blood than Michigan State, and Michigan State's not technically one. So where does that leave them? Because Final Fours are fun, but championship titles or banners or why guys are coaching, why players are playing. It's obviously harder in college, but like 5 in 24 years, dude, that's 21 or yeah, they won 21% of all national championships since the year 2000. That's fucked up.
It's crazy. I mean, it's dominant. Like, so Duke has 3 championships since 2000, and maybe we should do 1999 because that's when Kentucky or UConn won their first one. So that maybe that's a little bit more fair. Duke has 3 since then. UConn, we said has 5. Michigan State has 1. North Carolina, I believe. Let me pull this up here. They have two. No, they have three. So they
Kansas
have
has
three
2.
since 1999. Kansas has two. Villanova has two, and then who else? I mean, Florida has two. Where's Kentucky in this? I mean, where's UCLA? This is a so when you're discussing it that way, man, it's hard not to include UConn. But like you said, it's a term that I think is just more so like, hey, let's remember the past of college basketball, like the greatness that once used to be. Because let's be honest, in today's day and age, when you have one and done, and especially now NIL and just different things, you don't really have a chance to build a program like you did with Lou Alcindor and all those great players at UCLA back in the day. It's hard, it's different. So I think it's more of a moniker, just be like, oh man, remember those great teams of the past, those championship teams of the past. But I don't know. What do I know? When people really mean and talk about blue bloods?
It helps sell merch. I think it's a big
True.
big college thing where they're like, "Hey man, we've been famous since way before you've been watching basketball. You need this 1972 UCLA championship hat or whatever it is." Um, all-time tournament. All-time great NCAA tournament. Not the finish that I would have liked, but the finish that we should have expected.
Yeah, and I saw people trying to kind of poo-poo it a bit. They're like, "Well, the title game sucked." It's like, whatever, man. Like, just
It normally
enjoy it when you get
does,
there.
dude. Like we had a couple really good ones in the last couple years, but what UConn beat Butler, was it 59-43 or something?
Yeah,
Like
Jim
that's
Nance shouted it out too. When it was like 2 minutes into the second half, he's like, "Well, was that score that UConn Butler game?" I was like, "Oh, I forgot how
right.
bad that was."
The college championship games normally like aren't great because kids start out cold. Like my favorite, I think that we've ever seen was the Louisville Michigan game when it was Spike Albrecht and
Mm,
whoever, I can't remember who it was from Michigan, when they were going back and forth trading threes. But like,
Stauskas, I think, right?
yeah, I think it might have been Nick, but it was that was like the first time in my life I remember thinking like, oh, this thing's gonna go way over what people are thinking points wise. It's always guys come out tight. San Diego State didn't score for what felt like the middle 20 minutes of the basketball game,
Yeah.
and actually probably was close to the middle 20 minutes of the basketball game. That's college basketball, and if you don't like it, then you don't get the right to come on here and talk shit about how it was a bad championship game. That was just a college basketball championship game. The nerves were there. Everybody was a little freaked out. We love the tournament for the first 5 or the first
Right.
4 games. We don't like the championship game is it's its own separate thing within the NCAA tournament. It doesn't really count to me as March Madness because it's a one-off now. Now we these are the 2 best teams. You don't get to go on if you win. It's over. It's done. So the previous 4 or 5 rounds, though, that's where your bread's buttered.
And I just want to shout out, San Diego State before we move on to the future of college basketball here. And just some discussions, anything we learned from the season. Amazing year for them. And this was something that was coming. And Brian Dutcher just seems like such a good guy and such a good dude, just like so gracious, like before the game and talking with Tracy after the game, Tracy Wolfson. And yeah, this was a program that was built by Steve Fisher. He took over and has taken it to success and to heights, not seen previously. And so you really do feel for him because there's this questions like, and we'll get to it in this segment. Can a team like San Diego State really get back to a moment like that again? And we're not sure because that's probably the best group of guys that stayed. COVID extra year, you get some high level transfers that come over and then everything just goes right. And all of a sudden you're staring at an opportunity to win the national championship. And we're not quite sure if that's ever going to happen, but maybe it will, Tyson. So let's talk about, the future of college basketball. We kind of tiptoed around it a bit with the NIL stuff a couple weeks back and currently now, but there's also that aspect of what San Diego State just did as well. Are there going to be more ways to win? Like we've seen the one and done stuff with Duke and Kentucky. We've seen the Cedar Laden stuff with the Virginias. We've seen kind of like building from scratch, for lack of a better term, with what Danny Hurley did. And we had an opportunity from the older guys, COVID year, everybody's there together and we just stay forever with San Diego State who had an opportunity. Like, where do you think this sport is going?
I'm hoping it goes into the future. That was one thing, and I know that sounds a little vague, but college basketball has been, you run the same 3 sets as everybody else. Those are your plays. You have 2 or 3 different ways you can play defense. And that's how everybody plays. And if you figure out how to beat those styles with your athletes, you can go 40-0. That's how these teams rack up these 36-win seasons. They go 30-3 in the regular season, whatever it is. Um, there was some stuff in this college basketball postseason where guys were hunting shots that they don't normally hunt when you watch a broad scale of college basketball. When you turn on the West Coast Conference at like midnight your time, 10 my time, and it's San Francisco's playing or whoever, you're starting to see a little bit more of like, okay, well, there's shot makers out here. And I think that's going to be a huge thing because you mentioned like these small programs, your SDSUs, your FAUs. Brad, the most underrated part of those programs is they're in cool ass places to live.
True.
You want to go live in Boca Raton, you want to go live in San Diego. I think that's huge. Obviously, they're not going to have the money that Virginia can throw at you with an NIL or Iowa. I'm trying to think of places kids might not like think of firsthand as somewhere they want to live. But like, if I'm coming off a 6-man of the year season in the Big Ten and I got $300,000 to go to Iowa and I have $140,000 to go to live at Boca Raton, go to FAU. I think all of a sudden that's a little bit closer than the monetary value makes it seem like. Like at the end of the day, these are 20-year-olds. When I was 20, if I was talented enough to do anything like that, I know that's a thought that was going through my head is like, damn, but I could live there, like, and get paid. That's going to be huge to me. And I think that that's always been, and we talked about it in the college football one. I think that's a huge underrated part of the NIL stuff. Like these kids get to go now the opportunity to be independent contractors, and they're just figuring it out. If these schools can get on the forefront of it, these smaller programs, huge paradigm shift. I just don't know if the administration sees the value, and sometimes there might not be the value, but like how many people heard of Florida Atlantic University over the last month? How many people learned that the San Diego State basketball team has been good for a long time over the last month? Like these are things that kind of come to the forefront and then disappear during the regular season, and then we think about it again next March. It could become a thing where it's like FAU's going to the Honolulu Invitational, and you got to watch the fuck out. Like it's them and Dayton are the two you're worried about, rather than Michigan State and Kansas or whoever.
And I'll be interested to see if the NIL allows because normally it's these mid-major players who have those great years. Then it's like, okay, perfect. Now I get to go play in a Power 5 conference. Now I get to go showcase what I can do. Or does it make it so, okay, now we're going to offer an NIL package to this guy to come for this mid-major school? And he played with some guys in AAU basketball. Hey, come over here. We know you played there for the last couple of years. Come play with us, maybe your junior, senior year, your grad year, whatever the case may be. And that's how it prevents for all these great players, with going to these schools with major budgets in these major conferences. So the cream rises to the rise to the top. It's not very good on the bottom. And we're left with like, okay, so now it's just the top dogs again, like it used to be back in the day where, they have the money to go travel to see the best players in the country before we had video, before we could reach out, different things like that. Or like you were saying, is it just an equalizer? Well, shit. Well, I get paid. I get to go live in Boca. It looks pretty fun. Dusty May's an awesome coach. Oh, I get to live in San Diego. This is awesome. Man, right now I'm in Ames, Iowa.
Right.
Ugh, man, do I want to stay? So I'm curious about that. And I think to your first point too, in terms of like the future of everything, college basketball used to be so dominated by coaches, right? You have to run a set. And it used to be the old saying, right? The only person who could keep Michael Jordan under 20 points was Dean Smith, right? Because he would just pound the ball to death. He just make the offense pound the ball to death. And then Jordan would be like, oh God, he wouldn't be able to have up enough or get up enough shots to score 20. I think that's changing. I think we saw that a little bit with UConn. I think definitely with FAU, what Dusty May, kind of these new school coaches, Micah Shrewsbury, who's at Penn State, now at Notre Dame, bringing in this NBA ideology. Hey, let's just get up and down and play. Let's run great shots. Let's let our guys shoot open shots. If they miss, they missed. They're college kids, but let's get up more of them. Let's play this up and down style of ball. And last thing before we kind of move on, Tyson, and I get your final thoughts on that before we get into what we learned. I really want them at the NCAA to implement stuff from the NBA please allow the timeouts at the end of the game to move the ball to the front court. Does
Yeah,
anybody like them chucking 3/4 shots for game winners? No,
it's so
nobody
dumb.
does.
It's
Move it
so
up to the
dumb.
front. Give these guys a chance to hit a three when they're down 2 in the front court with 1 second left. Like, just do stuff like that. Don't be so rigid to change. I think a shot clock to 24 seconds would be awesome. I like the 3 where it's at right now personally. I think this is about the max that you could really push some of these college kids to shoot the 3. It was extremely down this tournament from a percentage standpoint. And then I hate to be that person. The quarters thing and the women's basketball, I kind of like it. I kind of
That's
like it.
hot.
Did we not see the scoring in that tournament? Like,
102.
woof, it was up, man. That was a great tournament if
UConn
you were
scoring
watching women's
200
basketball.
points a game if we move the
Oh my
quarters.
God.
Like
I
you're in
so
trouble.
I want to see some of that stuff. Just be less rigid. And Charlie Baker's coming in to take over for Mark Emmert as the president of the NCAA. We'll see kind of where he wants to go with things like that. I know he was very progressive as the governor of Massachusetts, pushing gambling forward there. So, he does have a mindset of, let's not say stagnant. So those are things I'm looking for in college basketball as we expand and other things happen.
I think that's great. I mean, while you were talking, and it might be a bit morbid, but like all the old coaches that we grew up with that everybody loved that were there for 40 years, they're moving on. And I think that's a pretty huge part of being able to push college basketball forward. Like we all love Coach K, or if you don't, you're like whatever. I mean,
You're
people
a
hate him,
hater.
so maybe
Yeah.
that's not correct. But like Roy Williams, um, uh, old boy from Syracuse, Boeheim,
Boeheim.
guys like that are kind of moving out of the game. Like you're telling me that there wasn't ever a time where they were like, "Hey, we should reduce from 10 seconds down to 8," and K was in there pounding the table saying like, "You can't do that. That's not college basketball." Of course, that stuff happened, and I think that now we're getting a bit younger, and that normally brings innovation. We'll see if it's good or bad, but I think college basketball needs some of it. Also, like, put a fucking quote on how many times these guys can blow the whistle. Like, you each get
Yeah.
12 a game. Like that's your max. Like nobody's trying to watch just these games take so long because these dudes don't actually know the rules.
It's hard to watch. Like, the refs need to be better. It's that's a whole different thing. The epidemic of poor officiating and why I think the officiating is poor. But let's get into what we learned to close this one out, Tyson. To close out the basketball season, because it was great for us both gambling, watching it. So if Tyson will tell you where to follow us on our chalkboard app, so you can get these picks for next year. But I mean, anything in particular that you wanted to take away from this, whether it was during the tournament, whether it was stuff during the season, anything you want to earmark as we get into next season as well.
Well, one thing that I always kind of went by when it comes to college, picking futures tickets at least, like I love teams that have future pros on them, and I don't know how much that is going to matter. If and
Interesting.
maybe this is the COVID year and next year, and as we get out of that, it'll matter a little bit more. But not all your favorite college coaches, John Calipari included, are very good at identifying talent. Like they sign these 5-star kids, and that's awesome. And that 5-star can't play a lick.
Right.
And so some of these guys are getting 2-star recruits who stay for 3 years, and then by the end of their 3rd year, they're probably going to go make a bunch of money in Europe. They're not even looking at the NBA, but they're going to give you buckets, and they're just better than you right now. Whereas in the past, it's like, okay, this team has 3 lottery picks. Like, there's nothing anybody can do with them until the pressure mounts up, and then maybe they choke a little bit. Now it's like, yeah, what happened to Alabama? Best player in the country. He didn't show up. A couple of the other lottery guys didn't show up, or first round picks that they have on the roster didn't show up, and they got beat down by a team full of 25-year-olds who nobody wanted coming out of high school. And like I said, maybe that's just a this year thing, and we'll reevaluate in a year. But it certainly feels like the talent gap for whole rosters is closing, whereas before it was like if you have 3 top end talents, like you win.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point. And I think Duke's a prime example of that this year. They had 5 5-star kids in this class, and they struggled to start the year. They did win the ACC championship, but they ran into a bunch of grown men in Tennessee,
You got beat
and they
up.
got out physical. And that's just the way it goes in college basketball sometimes. Same thing happened to Alabama. I mean, they got out physical by San Diego State. I think something I learned the more analytics come into play from these coaches, I think the more that we should take into account what the analytics are telling us. Now, it didn't help us with St. Mary's because they're still overvalued a bit. I think when I'm looking at the final Ken Palm report, he
They're
still
probably two,
has
huh?
they're 13th in the final report. But Connecticut, Houston 2, UCLA 3, Bama 4, Texas 5, Tennessee 6, Purdue 7. Those are great teams. And Purdue, obviously, I think they're always going to be a little bit overvalued with the coaching stuff. But the more that analytics trickle down from the NBA, where we know massive analytics have come into that sport or that level, and it gets more and more in the college basketball, I think the more we should pay attention to what's going on the analytical front. It's probably not a way to, handicap college basketball because they're freaking kids, but although it is a way, and we had a lot of success doing it this year, using it in part. But I think when you look at who the great teams are, who the teams are that can make a run, I think that's a very good resource to rely on, especially going forward.
Yeah, and I think Ken Palm's subscribers are going to go through the roof because he was pounding the table for UConn when they were on a 6-game losing streak or whatever in the middle of the season. Yeah, dude. And then the other one that just like shot makers off the bench are so much more important than people give them credit for in college basketball because no matter who you're playing or when you're playing, your best player will be in foul trouble at some point. And if you don't have somebody to come off the bench to be a microwave, you're screwed. And we kind of saw like the difference yesterday was like UConn goes to the second unit. Second unit is stroking threes. Like they're not slowing down. They're running the same sets. San Diego State goes to the second unit, and they were all like, "Dude, I cannot get. I have to go to the paint because I can't shoot," and they're getting sent back. So you need shot makers. Problem is, there's not a whole lot of shot makers in high school that are just ready to come out and play. So it's like it's kind of that balancing act of like the ego on the kid that is a 4-star that has been the best at their class or whatever all year long, all their entire life. Like, how do you tell them, hey, you're here for 3 years. Like, you're not ready because all the other coaches are telling them, like, you're the best thing to ever happen. Where they were
Yep.
going to do the same thing to him too. But now it's like, oh, I'm going to Eastern Michigan. Like, they told me I'm going to get 25 shots a game.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
A little
It'll be an
Amani Bates
interesting
slander
balancing
to
act.
end our show. It's unfair to get out of a college basketball season without talking about him.
True. And I think it's deserved in some parts. As far as the betting goes, we had a great year, 54%, high volume plays, over 700. That's not going to be the case next year. This was a little test run I wanted to see because first time we done it in the chalkboard, and so I wanted to try out something new, and so I think found a little something there. And Tyson will tell you where to find the rest of the plays.
Yeah, they're in the Chalkboard app. It's on the App Store. It's on Google Play, wherever you download your apps. Our group name is The Roundtable. Brad mentioned he threw down, a little over 700 plays in total, 54%. Closed like a monster, like closed like crazy. What I think swept the second day of the Sweet 16, might have swept the Elite Eight, and then the Final Four as well. And then got in front of the train. Right, but who cares? We're not going to talk about that. But yeah, so that's the numbers from the college basketball season. During the college football season, I think we both finished a little bit above 70% as far as the picks that we gave out in the chalkboard. The NFL season, we rolled up 12 straight weeks of player prop parlays or player props during primetime games. So it started with like $20 and turned it into whatever that times 12 equals if you're taking the odds. We're not geniuses here. I don't quite remember off the top of my head.
I can't. Geez,
it was a little chunk. And then we have NBA stuff going right now. We got MLB stuff. Hell of a start for the kid on the MLB stuff. I think Brad came out opening day and he went full Aaron Judge on everybody. But it's the Chalkboard app. The group name is The Roundtable. And I tell you what, we have a huge golf week this week.
Yes, we do.
It's not just us posting pics in there, by the way. It's a little bit of community that we're trying to build up. And if you join the group, like, you're more than welcome to hop in there and throw your plays down too. And if you think that our plays suck, tell us they suck, because we're sitting here hand up the whole time. Like, our picks are right there and we can't go back and edit. At least I can't. I haven't figured it out. I think Brad's gone back and edited all the ones that he lost. That's the only way I can come up with him ripping these things off. But yeah, man, I mean, it's just, we're trying to have fun, and it's fun. And the Masters week is going to be huge.
Absolutely. Definitely get in the app. It's a bunch of fun in there. In the meantime, like and subscribe and share the show. We appreciate you guys watching. Connect with us on our social medias. Our Instagram's @_the roundtable pod _ our TikTok handle is the same. And then go ahead and send us a tweet over @TRT_pod. We have a ton of content coming out this week. Masters preview for all you golf fans. I've gotten like 3 texts from people already, like, who you got for the Masters? So don't you worry. We got some content out, and then we're getting right back into the NFL draft dive. Tyson, I just secured a source on something. I can't wait to release that. So make sure to check that out. We got a ton of content coming out for you guys. So later this week, we'll be speaking with you then. Peace.